When I turned 65, I finally bought a small RV, ready to start my retirement dream of traveling across the country. I sold my house, gave away my furniture, and trusted my only son when he said, "Stay with us a while, Mom. We'll take care of you." But weeks later, I overheard my daughter-in-law whisper, "Once the kitchen's done, she needs to go." I smiled and walked back to my room without saying a word. 3 days later, during a family dinner, my 9-year-old granddaughter stood up and repeated something that made everyone freeze. After retiring from 40 years of teaching, I thought I had finally earned the right to disappear into my dream. I was 65, widowed for nearly a decade, and ready to spend the rest of my days chasing the open roads in a second-hand RV I'd been saving up for since I turned 50. No more alarm clocks, no more report cards, just me, my dog-eared journal, and the desert highways. David, my only child, used to be the boy who kissed my forehead before bed and whispered, "One day I'll buy you a house by the ocean." He'd grown into a tall man with soft eyes like his father, married to a beautiful woman named Aubrey. They had a daughter, Lucy, my precious granddaughter, who sent me hand-drawn birthday cards and misspelled grandma as grandma. I never doubted I'd be fine on my own. I'd lived alone for years and had a modest but reliable retirement fund, carefully saved in a separate account I opened shortly after my husband passed. I never told anyone the password, except David. "Just in case something happens to you, Mom," he said once, a decade ago. And like everything with David, I trusted him without a second thought. That summer, just a week after I made the down payment on the RV, I slipped down the last 3 steps in my porch and sprained my ankle. It wasn't serious, but it gave David the perfect opening. "Mom," he said gently at the hospital, brushing my hair back the way he used to when I was sick, "why don't you just come stay with us for a while? Lucy would love it. You'll heal faster. You won't be alone." I hesitated. I had always been proud of my independence. But Lucy's little voice came through the phone that night. "Grandma, please come. I miss you." And that did it. When I moved into their home, Aubrey was all smiles. She'd set up a cozy guest room, decorated with pastel throw pillows and a lavender candle on the nightstand. "Make yourself at home," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. Lucy squealed and clung to me as if I'd brought the sun with me. For the first few weeks, it felt almost magical. We baked cookies, watched old Disney movies, and even planted basil in little pots by the kitchen window. I felt useful again, needed. But small things started to shift. It began with dinner. One night, I decided to cook vegetable stew, my signature dish. As I stirred the pot, Aubrey peeked in and said sweetly, "Oh, we usually try not to cook past 6. Lucy has a sensitive nose, and the smell sometimes lingers into bedtime." I smiled and put the lid on the pot. Another day, I invited my friend Eleanor from church to stop by for tea. When she arrived, Aubrey greeted her stiffly and later pulled me aside. "Next time, can you let me know first? We're trying to keep the house low traffic. Lucy's got allergies." Then there was the matter of my shoes. I'd always kept them neatly by the door. One afternoon, I found them moved to the garage. A little note stuck on the rack said, "Shoes have strong odor. Better here." I began to feel like a guest in a place that once felt warm. Even Lucy, in her innocent curiosity, asked me why I didn't have a key to the front door. "It's just temporary," David said when I brought it up. "Let's not overcomplicate things." Still, I tried to focus on the good moments. I didn't want to be dramatic. I didn't want to be that kind of mother-in-law. But a quiet discomfort settled in the back of my throat every time I stepped into the kitchen or answered the door. One evening, I overheard Aubrey on the phone in the laundry room. Her voice was low, sharp. "I know it's annoying, but once we get the kitchen done, she's not staying." She didn't know I was standing just down the hall. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked to the kitchen for a glass of water. The light from the refrigerator spilled across the tiles as I opened it. Inside, the shelves were stocked. Greek yogurt, organic strawberries, oat milk, free-range eggs, bottles of cold brew coffee, all Aubrey's favorites. 2 days earlier, she'd told me they were cutting back, eating simply, saving every penny to renovate the kitchen. But somehow, there was always money for her almond butter and designer kombucha. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the hum of the fridge. I wasn't angry yet, not quite, just very awake. And for the first time since moving in, I felt like I didn't belong in my own son's house. It was a rainy Tuesday when I opened my banking app out of habit, expecting to see the same comforting number I'd watched grow for years. Instead, my stomach flipped. The screen blinked back a balance that was $50,000 lighter. I blinked, refreshed the page, checked the date. No mistake. I waited until David came home, sitting calmly at the kitchen table like a student preparing for a test. When he walked in, still in his tie and holding a fast food cup, I asked quietly, "Did you take money from my retirement account?" He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just sipped his drink and said, "Yeah, you told me to transfer it last week, remember?" I froze. "No, David, I didn't." He set the cup down a little too forcefully. "Mom, we talked about it. You said you wanted to help with the kitchen. Maybe you forgot." Forgot? For a moment, I considered the possibility. Maybe I was slipping. Maybe I had said it. But no, I remembered every dollar in that account. Every odd job, every teacher bonus, every coupon clipped for 2 decades to make that sum happen. I said nothing, just stood up and walked to my room. The next day, a man in a polo shirt with a clipboard knocked on the door. He introduced himself as the kitchen architect. Aubrey said I could measure today. Exciting project. I stood in the hallway as he walked past me into the kitchen, tape measure clicking. Aubrey followed behind, pointing at walls. "We're knocking this out, adding a butcher block here, quartz countertops, of course, and a double oven." She turned to me, still smiling. "It's going to be so much better for everyone. And thank you again, Marianne. You're a lifesaver." I stared at her. "Did anyone ask me about this remodel?" She blinked. "I thought David talked to you." "He didn't." Aubrey tilted her head, tone switching in a blink. "Well, I mean, you're just staying with us. We didn't think you'd want to be involved in all the decisions." "Just staying." The words stuck. I nodded slowly. "Right." That night, I skipped dinner, said I wasn't feeling well. David didn't knock. Aubrey sent Lucy in with a plate I hadn't asked for, which I left untouched on the dresser. I sat in my car, parked at the curb outside the house, windows fogging in the rain. I cried like a child. Not because of the money, but because I didn't know who I was in that house anymore. Later that evening, as I sat in bed pretending to read, Lucy tiptoed into my room in her penguin pajamas. "Grandma?" she whispered. I looked up and smiled. "Hey, sweetheart." She climbed beside me, voice hushed like she was confessing a secret. "Mom said once the kitchen is finished, you won't live here anymore." I didn't react. My face didn't change, but something in my chest gave way. She said, "You're old, and you won't need a fancy kitchen anyway." I brushed Lucy's hair back from her forehead. "What do you think about that?" She looked sad. "I don't want you to go." "Don't." I kissed her cheek and held her for a long time. "Me neither, baby." When she left, I sat up straight and pulled out the lockbox I kept hidden under my suitcase. Inside was a manila folder, copies of house deeds, old wills, and a copy of the transfer I had made years ago, signing the house over to David for tax reasons. I'd kept a clause in it, though, one my lawyer had insisted on. I retained legal control unless revoked in writing. I'd never thought I'd need to enforce it. That night, I rewrote my will. I signed documents transferring ownership back into my name. I called my lawyer first thing the next morning and made it official. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked the security camera app on my phone. I'd had the system installed back when I still lived in my old house before moving in with David. Out of habit, I'd left the motion alert notifications on, even after changing my address to theirs. I clicked through the last week's footage and saw David at 11:32 p.m., letting in 2 men carrying kitchen cabinets. 3 nights earlier, while I'd been asleep. He stood in the driveway in his slippers, directing them under the porch light. He didn't tell me. He didn't even try to hide it. He just assumed I wouldn't notice, or that I didn't matter. And that was the night something shifted. I wasn't sad anymore. I was awake. The morning after I rewrote my will, I sat in a law office surrounded by dark wood and the faint smell of old paper. My lawyer, Helen Marks, had been a former student of mine, once a shy, quiet girl with too many freckles and a love of debate. Now she was sharp, confident, and looking at me with deep concern. "This," she said, pointing to the printouts I'd brought, bank records, screenshots of the security footage, and a list of recent purchases on the remodeling account, "could constitute elder financial abuse, Marianne, especially if you never gave consent." I nodded, hands clenched in my lap. "You have the legal right to pursue this. The house transfer was conditional. You're still the controlling party. And this, unauthorized access to your retirement funds, that's serious." I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just asked, "How do we prove it wasn't an honest mistake?" Helen gave a soft, grim smile. "Let's find out." That night, I accessed my online banking again. With Helen's help, I pulled a full activity report dating back 2 years. I cross-referenced every transaction and noticed a name I didn't recognize, AR Holdings, LLC. After some digging, we found the registration. The LLC was linked to one person, Aubrey R. Coleman. My daughter-in-law had created a shell company to route the money through. She hadn't just taken my savings, she had laundered it through a business name, most likely to shield David from legal responsibility. I felt the sharp sting of betrayal all over again, but beneath it, something colder had begun to build. Resolve. A few days later, I drove 2 hours to a small suburb where Aubrey's sister, Vanessa, lived. She and I had only met twice. Christmas parties, polite smiles, but I remembered her fondly. She invited me in, surprised. "Wow, I haven't seen you since, gosh, maybe Lucy's first birthday." We chatted over tea, and I told her carefully, without accusation, what had happened. Vanessa didn't look shocked. She didn't deny anything. Instead, she sighed and said, "I knew she was doing it again." I sat forward. "Again?" Vanessa nodded slowly. "Our great-aunt Lydia. Aubrey moved in to help her after a fall. Within 6 months, Lydia's savings were gone, and Aubrey walked away with a new car and some vague claim about Lydia giving it to her." I stared at her, stunned. "No one could prove it," Vanessa added, "but I always knew. You're not the first, Marianne." I left that house more certain than ever. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't dramatic. I had been targeted. When I returned that evening, David was waiting for me in the kitchen, arms crossed, jaw tight. "I know you've been digging," he said. "Aubrey's sister called. You're going to destroy this family." I stared at him. "I'm not destroying anything, David. I'm just trying to take back what's mine." He looked away. "Please don't go to court. Don't involve lawyers. I'll buy you that RV. I'll get you a driver, a trip, anything. Just don't go public with this." I laughed. Not out of amusement, but disbelief. "Do you remember when you were 12 and begged me for a guitar? I skipped lunch for 3 weeks to afford it." His face darkened. "I didn't do that, so one day you'd grow up and steal from me." He opened his mouth, then closed it again, and walked out. That night, Aubrey banged on my door. "If you're going to treat us like enemies, maybe you shouldn't be living here. Maybe it's time we change the locks." I stared at her. She stared back. There was nothing left to say. The next morning, I packed a single suitcase and left without a word. I rented a small, quiet place on the edge of town, just a week-to-week lease. It had creaky floors, ugly curtains, and the kind of silence that feels like a friend. I didn't tell anyone where I'd gone, but I didn't disappear. I was preparing, gathering everything, planning every move. And then a message from Lucy popped up on my phone. It was a voice memo. Her whisper trembling like she knew it was dangerous. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I heard them talking last night. Mommy said, she's old. She should just shut up and disappear already." Daddy didn't say anything. He just nodded. I listened to it twice. Not for the words, I already knew them in my bones, but for the voice that carried them. Lucy's voice. And I promised myself right then, I wouldn't disappear. I would make them see me. In the quiet of my rented apartment, I printed everything. Bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals. LLC records linking Aubrey to the shell company. Camera footage with timestamps of David letting workers into the house at night. Screenshots of text messages. Even Lucy's voice memo. And finally, Vanessa's handwritten letter. She'd offered it without hesitation, confirming that her sister had done the same thing to their great-aunt. I organized the documents into color-coded folders, 2 full sets. One was mailed to Helen, my lawyer. The other I kept with me, locked in a briefcase under my bed. Then I began making calls. "I'm planning a little farewell dinner," I told Aubrey over the phone, putting on the warmest smile I could manage. "I've decided to look into moving into assisted living. It's time." There was a pause. "Oh," she said, "that's probably for the best." David didn't call. He didn't need to. I already knew his silence. The night of the dinner, I wore my nicest dress, soft navy silk with a string of pearls my husband had given me the year before he died. The dining room had been set with candles. Aubrey had made her famous kale quinoa salad. David poured wine. "Let's get a selfie," Aubrey chirped, holding up her phone. "This is such a special night. Thank you, Marianne, for being so understanding." I smiled politely. Lucy sat beside me, squirming. She was nervous, and I could feel it. After dinner, I stood slowly and tapped my glass. "Before we finish dessert," I said, "I'd like to share something." David stiffened. Aubrey looked at me, uncertain. I turned to Lucy. "Sweetheart, could you help me read something?" She nodded and came to stand beside me, holding the envelope I had handed her earlier. She unfolded the paper with trembling hands and began to read aloud, her small voice clear and even. "My name is Lucy," she said, "and I love my grandma. She taught me how to bake cookies and spell Wednesday. She gave me hugs when I had nightmares." David shifted. Aubrey's smile began to twitch. "But this week I heard Mommy and Daddy say that Grandma should disappear, that she's old, and I know that's wrong. Because Grandma is not a burden. She's brave." The room went silent. Lucy took a deep breath and continued. "Grandma said she has proof. She said she heard everything, and she showed me papers that say this house belongs to her." Aubrey stood up so fast her chair screeched. "What is this?" I turned to face her, calm, unmoving. "You took money from my retirement account. You used it to remodel a house I still legally own. You lied to me, manipulated my trust, gaslighted me in my own son's home." David opened his mouth. I raised a hand. "No, not tonight. Tonight I speak, because you've taken enough." I pulled out the folder and placed it on the table. "This contains everything," I said. "Financial records, business links, witness statements, and a copy is all ready with my attorney." Helen appeared then, from the doorway. She had arrived a few minutes earlier, unnoticed, per my request. "This is real," she said, "and it's enforceable." Aubrey's face turned red. "You invited a lawyer to dinner?" David stepped forward. "Mom, please, this doesn't have to get ugly." I looked at him for a long time. "Do you know how many times I skipped dinner just so you could go to music lessons? How many Christmases I wrapped gifts from Santa while your father worked double shifts?" He looked down. "I taught you kindness, and you forgot." Then I took a deep breath. "But I haven't, which is why I'm not keeping this house." They both looked up. "I'm donating it," I said. "The deed will transfer into a scholarship trust for underprivileged girls in Lucy's name. This house will help someone, just not you." The room broke into stunned silence. Lucy's mouth dropped open. "But what about us?" David finally whispered. "You have jobs. You have youth. You have each other," I said. "I have dignity, and I'm taking it with me." Aubrey lunged toward the folder, but Helen blocked her. "I wouldn't recommend that," she said quietly. I bent down to hug Lucy. She held me tight. "You're so brave, Grandma," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm just done being quiet." The day after the dinner, I returned to my rented apartment with a sense of stillness I hadn't felt in months. Not peace. Peace comes later, but clarity. The kind that arrives after a storm, when the mess is still scattered, but the sky is finally visible. David didn't call that night. Neither did Aubrey. But Lucy did. "Grandma," she whispered into the phone, "are you okay?" "I'm better now," I told her. "I'm proud of you." The following week, things began to unravel quickly. Helen moved fast, filing civil charges against Aubrey for financial fraud, submitting documentation to the court for freezing her assets. The court approved the freeze within 72 hours. Aubrey's business accounts were locked, her emails subpoenaed. Her voice finally softened, but not out of remorse, out of fear. David came to see me 2 days later, alone. I let him in. He looked tired, shoulders slumped, face pale. The man who once dreamed of becoming a social worker now stood in front of me, begging for understanding. "I didn't know," he said, eyes glassy. "I didn't know she went that far." "You knew enough," I said. "I thought we'd just borrow it. I didn't think you'd miss it. I thought you'd be proud of what we were building." I stared at him, heart heavy. "You stole from me, David, and worse, you let her turn me into a burden." He reached forward, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry." I didn't move to hug him. My arm stayed at my side. Instead, I placed my hand gently on Lucy's shoulder, who had followed him inside silently, clutching her notebook. "She needs to see what real consequences look like," I said. "Not just apologies." David sat on the couch and cried, like the little boy who once scraped his knees on the sidewalk and ran to me for comfort. But I had no more bandages left for him. Word spread fast. The neighbors, who once waved politely, exchanged zucchini bread over fences, and invited David and Aubrey to barbecues, stopped calling. Invitations dried up. Group chats left them unread. When Aubrey walked Lucy to school, other parents avoided eye contact. Teachers whispered. Rumors became headlines on local forums. And then the video surfaced. I hadn't known Lucy had recorded the dinner, but she had, on her old iPod propped quietly on the bookshelf behind her. The video showed the entire exchange, her reading the letter, my confrontation, Aubrey's meltdown, the reveal of the scholarship. She uploaded it to a private group for her school's anti-bullying club. A teacher saw it, then a parent, then someone on Reddit. Within a week, it had 3 million views. Within 2, I had over 1,000 emails. "Thank you," they said. "You told my story." I didn't know I was being abused until I saw this. My kids did the same thing. My daughter-in-law called me deadweight. I sleep on a futon in my son's garage. I started receiving speaking invitations, small gatherings mostly, church halls, retirement centers, community colleges. I didn't ask for a fee. I didn't want attention. But I said yes, because I knew what silence cost. One afternoon, after speaking at a senior center on the South Side, a woman named Gloria came up to me. She was in her 70s, hair tied back in a thin gray braid, eyes sharp behind thick glasses. "I gave my son my pension to help him after his divorce," she said. "Now I sleep on the pullout in his living room. His new wife says I take up space." She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The room already felt heavy with pain. "I used to feel ashamed," she added. "Now I feel angry." I nodded. That's the beginning of healing. After the talk, someone brought me a bouquet of sunflowers and a thank you card. Lucy had drawn the cover. Inside it read, "Grandma, you're my hero. One day I'll be just like you." I carried that card with me everywhere. Back at home, the scholarship fund was underway. Helen handled the paperwork, ensuring that the house's equity would go into a protected trust. The foundation would support first-generation girls entering college, especially those from single-parent or grandparent-led households. Lucy came over on Saturdays to help organize it. We picked out photos for the website, wrote the mission statement together. David tried calling again. I didn't answer. He needed time, not to fix things, but to face them. Aubrey moved out. Rumor had it she was trying to open a bakery under a different name, but people remembered. People watched. And I planted tomatoes in a window box, learned how to make sourdough, took painting classes with 3 other women from the support group. I didn't rebuild the life I had. I started a better one. The apartment I live in now is small, 2 rooms, a galley kitchen, and a tiny balcony that faces the ocean. But every morning when I open the windows and let the salt air rush in, it feels like a palace. I use part of my remaining savings to repaint the walls a soft peach color. I strung fairy lights above my windows and filled every empty corner with potted plants. I started a small garden box on the balcony. Basil, cherry tomatoes, rosemary. Lucy calls it Grandma's Jungle. I don't lock my art supplies away anymore. They sit out in the open, brushes soaking in jars, canvases stacked along the walls. Some mornings I paint before I even make coffee. Watercolor flowers, the ocean, once a still life of the pears Lucy brought me. Lucy visits every other Saturday. She brings books, asks questions about school, shows me the drawings she's made. We bake blueberry muffins and talk about the scholarship fund. She asks about the girls who'll go to college in her name, and I remind her, you didn't just witness justice, you were part of it. Every Wednesday we video call. She reads to me from whatever chapter book she's tackling that week. I let her pick which earrings I'll wear for the day. David came by for the first time in 3 months. He stood on the other side of the door holding a pie, store-bought, still cold. His hands trembled. I don't expect you to let me in, he said. I just wanted to see how you're doing. I didn't invite him inside, but I stepped onto the porch and sat with him for a few minutes. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He said, I don't deserve to call you Mom right now, but I'm trying to become the kind of man who could earn it back. I looked at him and didn't see my little boy anymore. I saw a man learning that consequences don't disappear just because you finally feel sorry. I'm not your finish line, I told him, but I'm glad you started running. It wasn't warm, but it was real, and real was more than we'd had in years. I've stopped trying to rewrite the past. I can't unteach myself the silence I endured, but I can speak now, and I do. Every Monday evening, I host a virtual class called Second Chances, Reclaiming Your Voice After 60. It started with 5 women. Now there are nearly 50. We sit on camera, faces lined with time, stories etched in wrinkles and pauses. I used to be the mother who never complained, I tell them. The wife who nodded. The woman who stepped aside. I thought that was love. I thought that was strength. I pause. Let the silence breathe. But love, without voice, becomes invisibility. And strength without boundaries becomes self-erasure. They nod. Some cry. Most smile quietly, like they're finally hearing a truth they always knew but couldn't say. One woman, Elaine, shared how her son moved her into his basement and told her it was only temporary. It's been 7 years. Another, Carmen, said her daughter changes the Wi-Fi password to control when she can go online, and yet, week by week, they speak louder. They begin saying no. They tell me they're planning their own exits, or reclaiming their bank accounts, or calling things by their names: abuse, control, gaslighting, truth. Sometimes I still get emails from strangers who watch the video, from other countries, other mothers, even adult children who say, I treated my mom like this. I didn't realize it until I saw your story. It doesn't undo the hurt, but it adds something else. Weight, witness, change. I've been invited to speak at a National Elder Advocacy Summit this fall. They want me to tell my story to legislators, policymakers, foundations. I said yes, not for the applause, But for the women who still sit at family dinners with tears hiding in their mashed potatoes, I want them to know you are not alone, you are not helpless, you are not in the way. You are the foundation they stand on. And if they treat you like furniture, they don't deserve the roof you built. I end every class the same way, with the words I wished I'd heard sooner. The words I hope echo in kitchens, living rooms, phone calls, and wills across the country. If they treat you like a guest in your own life, it's time to leave like a queen. Not in rage, not in shame, in dignity. Because walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do is pack her heart, her records, and her good shoes, and start over without asking for permission.